What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we'll be deviating from the usual airport updates for the Retro FSD series. Today we'll be taking a look at the history of one of Sioux Falls' longest established air routes in the nonstop to Minneapolis-St. Paul. It has quite a storied history, with numerous air carriers having operated this route, and I'm eager to share how far it's come. Let's get started. Sioux Falls and Minneapolis have been connected for decades in a number of ways. From the early days of the railroad to the current day of the automobile and more, we've been delighted to be connected to the most populous metro in the upper Midwest. Today, there are several ways you can get to and from Minneapolis. Several routes are available by car, averaging around 4 hours one way, by bus on Jefferson lines, or, most importantly, by plane, which takes around 45 minutes from wheels up to wheels down. A number of air carriers have operated this route, and yes, it does go beyond your usual suspects in Delta and its predecessor Northwest. The earliest documentation I could find of this air service existing dates to the early 1940s, specifically 1941, when Mid-Continent Airlines had just started service to Sioux Falls. The flight was operated on Flight Number 4, also known as the Twin Cityan, using a Lockheed Model 18 Lodestar. With a cruising speed of around 200 miles per hour, the flight time was booked at an hour and 20 minutes according to the timetable, not a far cry from the 45-minute flight times we see on the segment today. By the end of World War II, Mid-Continent began to add the Douglas DC-3 to their fleet, which would be operated on this nonstop shortly after. The service continued to the early 1950s, until 1952, when Braniff International acquired Mid-Continent. Braniff acquired Mid-Continent's fleet of DC-3s and Convair 240s at the time, including some unfulfilled orders, and would take over all service on this route. Skipping ahead to 1955, we arrive at the point of Western Airlines' arrival into Sioux Falls. It was added to an already extensive network at the time that reached as far east as Minneapolis. With that, Western and Braniff were now operating this route simultaneously, and it would continue this way for a number of years. By 1957, another new airline arrived in Sioux Falls in North Central. They connected the city to a route network spanning north to Fargo before going southeast through Minnesota towards the Twin Cities. Western and Braniff would slowly upgrade aircraft over time, moving away from the DC-3s and Convairs to more luxurious offerings like the DC-6 and Lockheed L-188 Electras. In 1967, two major changes happened. First, Braniff left Sioux Falls as they focused most of their operations out of Dallas to and from Latin America and beyond. And second, North Central introduced a nonstop from Sioux Falls to Minneapolis, initially using Convair 580s. They would bring the Douglas DC-9 to Sioux Falls on the nonstop by the following year. By this point, it was now Western and North Central operating this route. Western has now transitioned over to the Boeing 737 for a majority of their operations. It's now the 1970s, and we move into the end of the decade for the next major event. North Central and Southern have just merged to form the first airline merger after airline deregulation. Little would change on this route outside of the operator during this decade. It's now time for the 1980s. This decade is loaded with all kinds of happenings. Starting in the fall of 1983, Mesaba Airlines has begun service on the nonstop. At the time of the service introduction, they used the Beech 99 airliner. In 1984, Western cut the Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop. A route map from this year shows FSD only being connected to Omaha of all places at this time, as the service to Pierre was also cut. This left just Republic and Mesaba on the Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop, and they've now updated their brand identity. Also in 1984, Mesaba Airlines has upgraded the aircraft type to use the Fokker F-27 alongside the Beech 99. Ozark Airlines and American Central Airlines have now jumped into the mix this year, increasing the total number of carriers operating this route to 4. Ozark operated the DC-9 on this route, as was the case for all their operations, but this lasted for only a year before being dropped. On the other hand, American Central Airlines was one of many commuter airlines that operated in the 1980s, created in the wake of airline deregulation. It began as another iteration of Mid-Continent Airlines before it was renamed to American Central. They only lasted 3 years, from 1982 to 1985, after a deal to be bought out by regional carrier Comair had fell through. They used the Embraer EMB-110 and Piper Navajo in their fleet. Heading into the fall of 1986, Northwest Orient officially acquired Republic Airlines in a deal worth over $800 million. That meant the thermometer of Northwest Orient had full access of the Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop. At the same time, the airline renamed themselves to Northwest as the airline focused more on domestic expansion during this time. Mesaba Airlines has also become a regional airlink operator for Northwest Airlink. In the 1990s, not a whole lot changed. Northwest was operating the DC-9 and occasional 727 on their new mainline service, while their airlink flights were operated on the F-27 early on before switching to newer aircraft such as the Dash 8-100 and Saab 340 later. United Express and AirVantage started operations on the Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop in the 1990s using small turboprop aircraft like the Embraer EMB-120 and Beech 1900 and the Metroliner respectively. AirVantage is unique in that they did not operate out of MSP, rather St. Paul's downtown Holman Field. Since they're still operating into the same metropolitan area, I decided to count this into the list. Both carriers ended their Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop services well before the decade came to a close. The 2000s didn't see too much more change initially. Northwest had now switched to using the then newer Airbus A320 and A319 on the nonstop while keeping the DC-9. Flights continued as normal until 2008, when it was announced that Northwest and Delta would be merging. At the time, it would create the world's largest airline, of which officially began in 2010 when the merger was completed. In the spring of 2009, however, all Northwest flights into Sioux Falls were now listed as Delta flights, though an occasional Northwest painted plane would still show up from time to time, predominantly on the DC-930 as they never received Delta colors before being retired. Delta operated the DC-950 and Airbus A319 and A320 on mainline right after the merger, while the Saab 340s remained for a couple more years, along with the CRJ-200 and occasional CRJ-900 and Embraer 175. The DC-950 was retired by 2014, while the CRJ-200 disappeared from the nonstop by 2022. That brings us to today. Delta Airlines remains the sole passenger carrier to operate on the Sioux Falls to Minneapolis nonstop. Currently, they use the Airbus A319 and A320 for mainline, and a mix of the CRJ-900 and Embraer 175 for Delta Connection flights operated by SkyWest or Endeavour Air. And that will do it for this video. I'm quite happy with how this turned out, and I'll be eager to do more of these videos covering our other established routes to see how they've evolved as well. Let me know what you think. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.